Okay, so we are recording. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining the call. It's been a little bit of a struggle to find the date, but it's summertime, so it is okay, it's understandable. Right, okay, so let me give you just a very quick overview of what this group is going to achieve, because I know that actually some of you were already on the first call, so you know, but some perhaps don't. Okay, let me try to go and see. Okay, so the scope of the group, it's really defined in the page, and the idea is that we need to define qualitative and quantitative metrics that support the data discovery index, the prototype the bioCADDIE is building. So the idea is that we want a different kind of metrics that help us filter the results that the index, the data set that the index is going to present to the user. And we want to be able to somehow use metrics which are based on provenance of the information, or for example, on the number of times the data set has been cited or has been downloaded, or how richly curated it is. So we really need a variety of metrics. And as I say, these are both qualitative and quantitative. As a working group, we don't intend to really create anything new, given that there are many groups like you want to represent that are already working in this area. And that's why the mission, our first mission is to learn from those groups. What is there you are doing? What are the lessons you have learned, and which actually advice or example of metrics that you have implemented and you realize that are important that we do need to use, and how actually we can define them. And instead, if you have just started, because some of you actually in terms of activity have just started, the idea will be that we give to you our use cases, and in some cases we have already done that. Okay, so although we don't have in a way many groups or many members in the group, you really represent larger, effort where there are many people involved. But of course, if you think we are missing somebody specific or some other project that we should consider, we are very happy to hear about, so we can have a representative. So I believe those of you already, which are external to bioCADDIE, perhaps already heard the quick introduction of bioCADDIE, and this is really a slide to provide you for more information where to go and read to this, about the scope of the prototype, what the prototype is supposed to be and what the prototype is not supposed to be. But in a nutshell, the idea is that there will be a lot of resources, data resources that we need to reach and index, and the data will remain those resources, and the metadata will be moved to it's part of the prototype. So the question for this working group here, it's how do we define those metrics which are important for the DDI? How actually, as I said, we help the user of this prototype really to filter potentially what can be a lot of results. Let's say the query, looking for organism or for a specific disease, they might hit and retrieve a lot of data sets. How do we filter these data sets to the users according to certain metrics? And here again in these slides, we list some of the metrics that actually are described in the bioCADDIE white paper. So really the idea is that how do we rank the results? How do we restrict their search? So what's the role of the people that we invite in the working group? It's indeed to advise us based on the work that you are doing. It's what really to do, what we should be aware of that you learn already. Reason for the scope specifically is that we invite to hear from each of them. I hear somebody typing, perhaps it's wrong. It's wrong, please. Sorry. So we would like to hear, if you have 10 minutes actually more whenever you need it, because at the moment it seems like we only have 2 presentations today, to hear about what the scope of your project specifically is, how your project related to the others, because they seem quite closely related, but we know they're complementary. We would like to hear about specific things you have learned, specific deliverable being service or specification that we need to learn more about and that we can implement in bioCADDIE. And again, also it's to, if there are activities that you haven't started or you are interested in starting, then perhaps bioCADDIE can provide you and work with you with our use cases. And that's really all I had to say, because it was just, again, a reiteration of what we say in the first call. Any specific question on what this group needs to do?
Not at this point.
Okay. Mark, then, shall I actually, okay, so you don't have slides, but if you want to actually go first, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to take notes as you talk, and as I said, perhaps you can help enriching.
Yes. Okay, so when I start talking, I think my first problem is that I'm involved in 3 projects listed here. So the NISO Altmetrics initiative, I'm helping out with this project together with Christy and Mike, and there are 2 other. There's basically in the NISO project, Christy will talk about this, there are 3 groups working on different things, and one group that Christy and Mike are chairing is all about data, but for example, data quality is another topic that's very relevant here. So I'm involved in all 3 groups together with Nettie Lagas from NISO. Another project I started to be involved in is Thor, which is an EU-funded project, which is at its focus is about linking data and people, or persistent identifiers for data and people, but there's a lot of overlap what bioCADDIE is interested in. Joe McIntyre is in this project representing the EBI perspective, or the life sciences data perspective, and I'm sure you all know Joe. I think she's still on vacation this week. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about Thor. I'm sort of in the working group where we currently doing research sort of what you call qualitative data. So information associated with data sets, for example, something we have focused on is not only sort of identifiers for people like ORCIDs, but it's also funding information and affiliation information. And we're comparing the metadata, schemata that the data side is using, ORCID is using, and some other initiatives. And it's quite interesting to see. It's quite painful to go from one place to the next place, and I'm sure you will also have already run into the same problem, or will, that aggregating data from many different places just poses a major challenge in what you do with the metadata, and that's of course a very old problem. I think what's probably most interesting for today, and I can talk a bit more about it, is the Making Data Count project. The best person to talk about this today would have been Jennifer Lin, because she, this is an NSF-funded project, an EAGER grant, which goes 12 months, and we will be finishing this October 1st, and Jennifer has sort of written a first draft of our annual report, which we have to deliver very, very soon. But I'm happy to give an overview, and because we talked a bit about this in the last call, I can especially talk about sort of what has changed. So the first thing that has changed, if we talk about finishing October 1st, that we have a extension, sort of unfunded extension until March 1st, and which basically means that we have a little bit more time of not so much doing the work, but thinking about what comes after this, just to sort of to summarize what this project is about, this is about collecting metrics for data sets on a very practical level. So collecting metrics, seeing what are the pain points, what kind of software tools you have to adapt. And we were using data sets from the Data One repository network. That's an NSF-funded network, which is mostly earth sciences. Although, for example, the Dry Digital Repository is also in there with a good amount of data sets, and that's, of course, all life sciences. Overall, this is about 150,000 data sets. And the basic idea was to bring together the expertise from 3 different groups. So Data One, in particular Matt Jones, of course, they're not only providing the data sets, but they have done some specific work. The most interesting one for you is probably user stats for data sets, and we can get to that in a moment. The California Digital Library did a lot of work in the beginning of the project, interviewing people and figuring out what kind of metrics researchers and data centers are interested in, and the results of this have just been published in Scientific Data, and have been presented earlier this year. So maybe in the discussion, if there are questions, we can talk about it, but it's also available. Like I can paste the DOI in this Google Doc. And the short version is, of course, if you ask researchers, they want citations, and then they want nothing else for a while, and then they maybe want downloads of data sets. But all the other things, using social media metrics, is not really something that they care about. So things like tweets and Facebook, etc. So I think John Kratz and Carly Strasser are, if you look by authors, that's probably the fastest way to do that. And the part that the Public Library of Science had was using our experience in collecting metrics for journal articles and see how we can apply this to data sets. And that was mainly my role as a technical lead. And the first part of the work that I did there in parallel to the surveys, etc., I was just mentioning, is the problem of persistent identifiers for data sets, or not the problem, but the fact that that's much more heterogeneous than what you have for journal articles. From Data One, they don't have a required or recommended persistent identifier. About 60% of the 150,000 data sets have data site DOIs. The second largest group of identifiers is ARCs. And then you have a lot of local identifiers. There were 2 challenges with this. One is just building a system that's flexible enough to handle all kinds of identifiers and at the same time do useful things if it's a DOI or an ARC. And the other problem is of course, if you want to collect metrics, then you have to find out information about these identifiers. And with the exception of user stats, these things are happening somewhere else. So it's really not enough to have a local identifier that the repository understands and that works within the confines of the repository. And that is sort of, we can go in more detail maybe in a discussion, but that's sort of an interesting experience that we learned, that you can collect metrics for any kind of identifier, but if the identifier is not used in other places beyond your repository, you will not find much. And that's sort of why you find more things for DOIs than for example, local identifiers. The basic technical decision that we took was to say, in the context of metrics, we try to represent every identifier as a HTTP URL, which means if we find things then it's probably in the context of the web in a wider sense. And this works really well for DUIs, but it also works for all the other identifiers. And that was also, so that was one of our conclusions, that this is really helpful. And I think, or I know that there are other approaches to this, in particular life sciences, where you use namespaces basically, and that's something that is a little bit trickier if you build a system to track metrics and heterogeneous groups of metrics, and using HTTP URLs helps solve that. Is of course closer to what the linked data community is doing, and is sort of one of the many small conclusions we had there. The next step, after we had sort of all the data sets imported into this data metrics collection system, was to go out and collect events. And this is sort of a very flexible term. We were mostly interested in citations, but if we find mentions of data sets in Wikipedia or in Mendeley, then we also, of course, capture that. For citations specifically, the major challenge is that there are not many places where you find data citations. The short answer is that the best place to do that is open access contact, where you can do full text search of the article, because many data citations are informal citations, so they don't appear in the reference list, but maybe in the methods section. And even if they appear in the reference list, maybe that reference list isn't really available because it's sort of behind a paywall. Which means that the best data source for us, even though it was geosciences, was actually EuroPubMed Central. The US PubMed Central would, of course, be as good, but it seems that Joe McIntyre has built a nicer API for full text search, where you can, for example, say, and we haven't analyzed this in detail, we only want to look at data in specific sections of an open access document. Overall, the number of citations we found was fairly low. It's about 2,000 citations in EuroPubMed Central, and then there's of course overlap. Biomed Central and PLOS, as two large open access publishers, we have similar results, but it's of course a subset, and that is sort of still one of the biggest problems, and that's sort of independent of the problem of how people cite things. Because if you do a full text search, a DOI is really easy to find, and an ARC. And if the identifier is sort of, let's say, crazy enough, and it's not just a number string, then a full text search works. It's of course more work, but that wasn't the limitation, whether people put it in a specific format or in a specific place of the document, but really rather having access to the content in the first place. I'm not sure where I am with time. With citations, that's something where we have to do more, and the biggest challenge is just access to content. And this project was far too short to so for example, negotiate with subscription publishers to figure out how you can do this in a way that benefits both sides. And of course, this was a 12-month project, which is as a research project and not a production service that sort of charges money and then can sort of pay for access to these things. Do I have a few more minutes, Susanna? So I would like to just briefly mention two things.
I think so, yes, please, because I think it is only Christy then presenting. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I said from our initial work, the and I think that's also what we assumed and what you probably assumed, the second most interesting metric in terms of quantitative metrics is downloads. And Data One has done a good amount of work on this, and I think Christy will probably also talk, well, I'm sure she will talk about this. The standard for user stats for journal content is Counter. And for data sets, there is no standard how you can't use its stats, and Counter has just started to think about whether their standard could be adapted, applied to data sets. So what Matt Jones and others at Data One have done, which I think is very smart, is basically take all the user stats they have, and this is a repository network, so they get this from their, what they call member nodes, and then do two things. One is apply the Counter standard as it is, and that basically is two things. One is sort of a blacklist of bots and crawlers that you exclude, and that's a fairly extensive list. And the other one is look at double-click intervals. So if somebody would download something again and again based on his IP address within a short period of time, then the Counter standard would say that you can only count this once. So Data One did exactly this, and that work was completed maybe 6 weeks ago, and there was a little problem with sort of moving this to the production server and indexing and making this available. So we have basically just started a week ago to have these data. So I think the next time we talk, we can talk about the actual data, but because we have basically just started to collect. But Data One did something else, which is what we call Counter Light, which is not apply the full standard, but do something similar. But the problem is that Counter excludes a long list of robots, and that includes a lot of, let's say, API clients, which would be absolutely normal users for downloading data. So everything that, for example, is just a Java library or Ruby or Python library would probably be excluded by Counter because it's not a human being, and Counter cares only about human beings. But for data, API use is just very important. So they did not exclude some of these reasonable users, which are not sort of bots and crawlers and misuse, but probably just real users of the data. And sort of the interesting thing that is left for us to do in September is to compare these two numbers, to say, is there a lot of human use, or is there a very high percentage of sort of machine use, and is this proportional? So is this something where if you talk about relative numbers, and that's what the standard of course is about, that it doesn't really matter? And do we have to convince the Counter folks that they should think beyond humans, if you will, and think about machines in their standards? Or is that maybe something which is not so important, and at the end of the day, the Counter standard for articles more or less works also for data sets? And we have started a conversation with Counter organization, and I think Christy will talk about this more general. And I think that sort of is a good tie-in to have some real data for data sets that they can look at and decide how this standard applies. And the last bit I wanted to talk about is what do we do after these 12 months? And something funny happened in this project that you probably are aware, or you saw this, that sort of a lot of the people that started this project have moved on to other organizations, which means that Trisha Cruz now works for DataCite, Jennifer Lin now works for Crossref, Carly Strasser now works for the Moore Foundation, and I also work for DataCite. Crossref as of this week, so that's really new. We are all very committed to finish this project, and we're sort of trying to address the same problems with other hats on, but we of course started about maybe in July to think about what do we do after this project. Of course, this is an EAGE grant where the idea is not to build a service, but to learn something. And I think there's a lot that we have learned, and something that I should also mention that, of course, we will not only have a report and the things we learned, but all the data we collected are available via API, but also as a download. There's some stuff to do, but there will be tons of data that people can look at. And we are currently, because the decision to have an unfunded extension until March, that was very recently. So currently we are thinking we can just keep the service running until March, and this gives us time to think about what we do afterwards and how we can turn this into a production service, because basically what we have learned is this all works. Maybe there aren't a lot of metrics for data, but it's not really different to collect metrics for articles where some of us have a lot of experience, and it's not really a technical challenge to make this an ongoing service, but we have to decide whether Data One is the best place to run the service, whether DataCite can do this, what other options there are, etc. And of course, if we have 6 more months, that also gives us more time to collect a little bit more data, for example, user stats, to collect more feedback, and to see where we want to go with this. And yeah, I think with that I stop, and I hope you have some questions.
Thank you, Martin. Any questions for Martin? Very quiet. You are either muted or you just do not have questions. Well, perhaps they might come later. Let's see. Let's do that. I'm going to give to. Thanks, Martin. Thanks again. So I think it will be interesting also to see, given that you are saying that you are deciding what to do next month. Perhaps this is something, you know, if we highlight something for bioCADDIE, I wonder, will you be interested in working together?
Well, I think I wouldn't be in this call and the last call if I was not.
Okay, good. Good to hear it. I'm trying to stop a second. And Christy, if you're ready, I'm going to give to you.
Okay.
Present a role. 1 sec. There you are.
I think it'll be exciting to see what screen pops up on everyone's display.
Oh. Hold on a sec. There you are.
All right,
now
great.
You present.
Okay. So what is showing on the screen right now?
Nothing.
Oh, all right.
I just do share and then share my screen.
Yes, you are presented, but there is something in your screen which says.
Okay.
You have to either you share the entire screen or a specific application.
Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, are we seeing my email or a PowerPoint slide?
We see the email and I think it's mine.
Okay.
Yes, now.
Is the feed pretty bad?
Can you try to make it full screen, perhaps?
Sure, just a moment, please.
There is a way that you can just select the PowerPoint application to share. At the moment, you are sharing the entire screen.
Okay. Oh, just a moment.
Oh, I think this is good. This is good.
Well, but then I can't see any of my notes. So.
Okay.
Let me see here. I apologize for this. I just don't use this very often. And I'm kind of surprised that 2 out of the 3 displays are taken up with this call. I'm wondering where I can put my notes. So let's do that here real quick. So thank you for the opportunity to join the call. I am here speaking on behalf of one of the 3 work groups that were established by NISO in order to better examine this space around alternative metrics. And Mike Taylor from Elsevier and myself, I'm at Northwestern, are looking at output types and persistent identifiers. We've got a great amount of help from Martin and Nettie, who are facilitating the calls, which makes an incredible difference in how we're able to get things taken care of, and for which we are grateful. So the notes that I have, I may have slides, but certainly set your expectations appropriately. There aren't, I've only got a couple of slides here. I just wanted to be able to provide you a little bit of information about the progress that we've made and the types of things that we're doing, and then talk about some of the activities that will be popping up here in the future. So first of all, I think it's fair to say that much like this effort, we've also been engaged in relationship building and engagement. I think that there is an understanding by everyone in this space, certainly everyone on this call, as well as everyone who's on the working group, that there needs to be robust and welcoming engagement with the other folks in this space who are thinking about similar issues. And so we've certainly tried to do this as well. We have a number of efforts that are, that we're thinking about in the context of openness and, and sharing, making many hands making light the work, if that's possible. And so what we have been doing recently is, trying to facilitate those engagements. Most recently, we had Lorraine Estelle from Counter on a call to describe their work. And she was able to share a timeline of the kinds of things that are happening at Counter. As Martin mentioned, Counter is well known and much loved certainly by those of us in the library community for helping us. It provides a standard for download data for journals, and we're really excited about the work that's happening in this space with the Data One project that Martin mentioned. And Lorraine has been an enthusiastic participant. Both Martin and Mike Taylor were able to have a couple of quick calls, I think, with Lorraine to try and begin to develop some structure around this and better understand what's happening at Counter. So it seems to me, and I encourage Martin to jump in on this because Martin's been on the call on those particular calls, but I have not had the opportunity to do so as I was out of the office. But as I understand it, they do have a project in place, and they're moving their activity toward trying to understand item levels of measurement, so item like these data sets. They're developing I believe she called it a new code of practice, and they will be coming out with an online survey this fall and they hope to be able to roll something out then shortly thereafter so that they can begin to make this more widely available. Martin, do you have anything else that I should, or that you would like to add to this? I'm sure I've forgotten something, but. No. Okay.
No, I don't have anything, but I also had to find the unmute button. So, but go ahead. It was.
Okay. Well, that's good. So, this is obviously very exciting. We also have been engaging with other groups, certainly CASRE, and the Force 11 has an attribution working group that is working in similar areas, and I'm part of the Force 11 group, so of course want to have them join the call and get a chance to talk about that. Oh, did someone have something to say? Oh, okay. And so that's very exciting. But I think in the context of relationship building and engagement, what we really want to do is to make sure and have an open line of communication. What we have been doing is engaging these partners to come and join our call as well. And so it would of course be wonderful if someone from this group would be able to join one of our working group calls so that you can share things from the bioCADDIE perspective as well. Let's see. Data is obviously something that we're all interested in. That's been something that has been of great interest to this particular working group, thus the conversations with Counter. But I think that there's also the nuanced discussion about not just traditional data, but how we're making use of it and how it can be leveraged, which is very exciting. One of the other areas that is a existing or in progress work area is to develop an aggregated list of output types. And I think that our group is very much embracing the alternative metric aspect of this, not necessarily altmetric so much. We're really wanting to facilitate better understanding of those kinds of, the interesting ways that we're able to measure attention or use in products that span the workforce. It's not just PIs writing manuscripts anymore, as everyone on this call knows. So this particular aspect of the project is ongoing. We're going to be building off of a list, actually, that I started. We work on a group of collaborators and I from Washington University, Kathy Sarley at Becker Medical Library. When I was there, we put together a list of about 350 outputs and indicators across biomedicine and things like basic science, clinical practice, economic benefit, and so on. That is becoming woefully out of date. Science is marching forward, and there are all sorts of new and exciting things that are happening. We had done some harmonization with the Vivo ISF ontology and the CASRE data dictionary, so we'll be making that available as a, kind of to jumpstart this process, and then be looking for other kinds of outputs and indicators as a community project. Let's see. This is being done by the group. I think we're ready to begin in earnest in some very well-defined work areas to get people engaged and to get them working together. So if any of you would like to join the call, we'd love to have bioCADDIE be able to present a little bit about the work that you're doing. And I guess it's probably best to end my portion just saying that we're excited to work together and look forward to the possibilities.
Jeff, are you on the line?
You might be muted, Ron.
Oh, okay. That last suggestion resonates well, and I think Jeff is probably in the best position to comment.
I think it's unmuted at the moment. It's muted.
Okay.
I'm not sure he can actually answer from the buzz, or it's looking for unmute button as well.
Okay. All right, Susanna, shall I give you control of the screen again?
Thank you. I don't have actually anything to present, but please.
Okay.
I have a question, and this is to Susanna and Jeff and Ron. Would the counter project be a good webinar for the bioCADDIE team?
I was actually thinking the same thing because I don't know much about it, and I think it would be interesting. Absolutely. If we were to have a webinar for the counter project, who would be the person? Should we contact Lorraine?
I'm not sure who does it. You might start with Stephanie, just to get it on the radar screen. But it does sound like a good topic for a future webinar.
Yes. And no, my question was specifically to Martin and Christy, if Lorraine Hestel was the person that we should invite for the counter project.
I think Lorraine would be a good start, and she did a great presentation to us. There is another person on the counter board who is very interested in this, Oliver Pesch from EBSCO.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third, well, actually, group of people is there's a project in the UK called IRIS UK, which is uses that for repositories, and they work very closely with Counter and involved in all the activities. And so Paul Needham is one of them, and they have sort of a perspective which is a little bit more closer to data repositories and some of the particular challenges. So that would also be interesting. So that's almost 2 webinars or more than 1 person.
Oh, right, okay. Or perhaps the idea is they will be willing to do like a duo, you know, have in one webinar potentially all the aspects.
Well, Susanna, one thing that you all might be interested in is that we are, at this particular NISO working group is interested in having NISO facilitate an open online like webinar style update for the different projects. And so we'd like to have something where, you know, everybody has, I don't know, 10 or 15, I mean, we're still very fluid, but 10 or 15 minutes to present what's happening with the group and, you know, kind of what everybody's thinking about there, and along with a little bit of introduction, and then hopefully an opportunity to tie some things together at the end. This can serve as personally speaking, I think it serves as a really good way to open the process up and allowing open engagement and to let people know what the different efforts are thinking about and that they are working together. And it can also serve as, you know, as an output. So, you know, that, you know, it can be listed as we are trying to engage and, you know, and get input from stakeholders.
That sounds great, actually. What do you think to try to, Ron, if we were to coordinate this with them?
So we're hoping to do something in November, and of course bioCADDIE would be part of it, we hope. We hope that you would want to participate.
Well, sounds good to me.
When in November?
So we haven't set a date. Let me open up my email and see. Just a second, please. Oh my gosh, my email is out of control. Okay, it looks like, I'm so sorry, feedback. Let me, okay, maybe that's, okay, thank you. It's the open dates right now are some of the following, November 12th, 16th, 17th, or 18th.
Okay, so November 12th is the all-hands meeting here in Bethesda.
Okay.
I think the first step is to get in touch with the right person at bioCADDIE to broach this with. And since Jeff is a key person on this workgroup 5, I think he's the right person to tap into to see about a meeting or a subsequent webinar.
Great. Thank you very much.
Ron, I think
Sorry, I missed you, Susanna.
I can help too because I'm co-chairing today. We are sharing the workload.
That's true.
I think we're going to try to coordinate offline with Kirsty and we are fully aware of the NIH and we will make sure that it's suitable days. But I think it's a good opportunity given that Anita is already thinking about such events.
Well, one of the overriding themes for bioCADDIE is outreach to the community. So any way in which what they're doing can be used as an opening to other aspects of the community is a good thing, and bioCADDIE is charged with following through on that.
Ron, the all hands meeting is November. What did you say? November 12th.
The 12th and 13th.
Because our webinar, our bioCADDIE webinar is scheduled on the 12th for the RRID, so we might want to change that.
Yeah, I did see that on a calendar, and I assumed that someone was going to change it.
I think that someone is probably me.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so I think we have come to a natural end of the hour. And I would like to thank Martin and Christy again. And what we're going to do, we're going to try to schedule another call and perhaps have the Kasserai and 4 when, because I know that Mark, you are involved as well. You're involved.
Yeah, and Sunya from the Kasserai is actually also deeply involved in this SOAR project.
Fantastic.
She's on vacation until I think the end of this week, so it's just the timing just didn't quite work out.
I know. Unfortunately, we started exactly during the summertime, and as I said, we struggled to find the date. So we will definitely need to reschedule for another call. I only would like to invite you, particularly you, Martin and Christy. So I took some notes in the document that I'm going to circulate it now. Okay, the link. It's available, openly available from the working 5 pages. Just try to take some notes so that, you know, we have a record of what we have discussed and now we move forward. Okay?
Yeah. And Susanna, if you would just add me to the membership list, I'll be sure to then get the messages.
Fantastic. And Steph, it's something you can do, please, because I don't think I have permission for people.
Yeah, Ron, do you want to be put on the mailing list for all the working groups or just work group 5?
Oh, good. 13 work groups, I think I'd have to clone myself several times over. I'm a member of, let's see, work groups 2, 3, the core development team, and let's just add this one.
Okay, we'll do.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you everybody, and you will receive an email that we try to schedule for the next call. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.